Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are on this beautiful planet of ours. Welcome to Sustainability in Your Ear, the podcast conversation about accelerating the transition to a sustainable, carbon neutral society. And I'm your host, Mitch Ratcliffe. Thanks for joining the conversation today. Food production is one of the most impactful forces shaping our environment, responsible for approximately a quarter of annual global carbon emissions, as well as deforestation and soil depletion, amongst many other impacts. However, a new generation of food and snack companies are stepping up to change the narrative, working to make food production a force for regeneration, sustainability, and environmental stewardship. Today, we're joined by Keith Bearden, CEO of Alter Eco Foods, a snack and chocolate maker on a mission to create a positive impact on the planet with regenerative agriculture, climate neutral products, and reduced waste. Founded with a vision to create a delicious food that benefits people and the environment, Alter Eco has pioneered transitioning cacao farmers to regenerative practices, and it has achieved climate neutral certification while innovating in sustainable packaging. We'll dive into the ways that Alter Eco is working to make a difference and lead the way for the food industry. And you can learn more about Alter Eco at alterecofoods.com. Alter Eco Foods is all one word, no space, no dash, alterecofoods.com. We'll be right back to start the conversation after this quick commercial break. Welcome to the show, Keith. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Great, and it's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for joining us. I've
Thanks for
tried to
having me.
summarize what Alter Eco Foods does in my introduction, but can you explain the promise you make to shoppers? What can they expect when they buy an Alter Eco product?
Well, absolutely. Well, first thing they should expect is a great tasting product because at the end of the day, why do people buy chocolate? They want it to taste good. They want to indulge themselves. Granola as well, although granola is a little bit different buying consumption habit, but our products, I tell my team, taste is the price of admission. So they should expect a great tasting product. But in addition to that, they should expect to feel good about that purchase because they're buying a product that's doing good things for the planet. Alter Eco lives on three basic core principles. Our first one is to restore ecosystems, hence the name Alter Eco. We focus on trying to source as much of our products and our raw materials as we can from farms that either practice regenerative agriculture or even go as far as agroforestry. So a
Mhm.
lot of our cacao beans are harvested in areas where it's true agroforestry in the jungles of Latin America. We source predominantly from Ecuador, Peru, and Dominican Republic. Second thing is we improve livelihoods. So all of our products are either fair trade or fair for life certified. And we focus on fair for life because that gives us a little more opportunity to work directly with the farmers to improve their livelihoods. And then the last one is reducing waste. That's our last
Mhm.
core principle. And all of our packaging for our chocolate products is at a minimum recyclable or compostable. Our granola packaging, because we need something that protects the integrity of the product a little bit better, we use plastic in our granola pouch, but it's post-consumer recycled plastic. So we try not to introduce virgin plastics into the marketplace. And our little truffles, which is some of our most popular items, they're actually backyard compostable, that wrapper is. And we're the only company in the world that has that.
I have heard so many people tell me they have a compostable packaging product, and one of the reasons, there were several reasons that we reached out to talk to you, but the compostable truffle package in the backyard is a big deal. A lot of people see compostable, but it actually requires industrial composting. How
Right.
did you find something that was so, as far as I can tell, rare?
Well, we spent years, honestly, looking for it because we put out anywhere between 15 and 20 million truffle wrappers a year. And being a principle of ours to reduce waste, we said, how can we make this thing, first of all, recyclable? Because most of them were plastic to start with. And
Mhm.
yes, it's recyclable, but it's introducing a lot of plastics into the marketplace. But we really started striving for compostable. And if you remember it was about 10 or 12 years ago, products like NatureFlex and PLA and things like that packaging came on the market. So we were like, well, why can't we use something like that? And we kept working with our packaging suppliers to come up with a PLA material that gave us the shelf life that we were looking for. And we get over a year of shelf life out of our truffles in that backyard compostable wrapper. And we've done extensive shelf life testing on these things. And the reason most other companies don't do it, it's expensive. We pay 3 times what I could buy a plastic wrapper for every one of those truffle wrappers. But we believe it's worth it.
The experience seems to be worth it, certainly. And now I want to. It's a question that I want to ask because I think it sets the stage for the rest of this conversation, which is what happens to chocolate if climate change continues unabated?
That's a difficult question and a very complicated answer, and I don't pretend to be the guru that could answer all of those questions. I will say that there's a big push across the entire industry to move toward regenerative farming. To give you a little background on cacao market in general. So number one, it's a traded commodity on the commodity exchanges in London and New York. So the prices fluctuate on a daily, minute by minute basis. But cacao basically grows in two regions of the world, Western Africa and Latin America. Western Africa produces about 60% of the world's chocolate. Most of that has been monocrop industrial farming. It's been there for decades, up to 100 years in some cases. And climate change has had a huge impact on that, especially most recently in the last 3 years. Yields in Western Africa have been declining year after year. This time last year, I could buy cacao beans for somewhere around 3,500 to 4,000 US dollars per metric ton. The harvest happens starting in October, effectively, and goes through the winter months because they're in the southern hemisphere. Well, the crops last year came in Western Africa, came in at about a 30% decline over traditional normal annual yields. So if they're producing 60% of the world's crop, 30% decline, you've got an 18 to 20% global shortage in supply. Cacao prices in April went to from 3,500 to 4,000, went to $12,800 a metric ton. That's not sustainable for anybody. Fortunately, they've come back down a little bit as harvests have started. The harvest this year is actually looking a little bit better than last year, not back to,
Okay.
pre-climate problem prices or volumes, but the prices are back down to around $7,000 a metric ton, but that's still double what I paid for it last year. So every chocolate company in the world has had to raise their prices. Fortunately, we've been able to manage it because we don't source anything from Africa. We source from Latin America because that's where 90% of the world's organic chocolate comes from, and all of our chocolates are organic. But it's a commodity. So the Latin American farmers deserve to make as much as the ones in Africa. So we're paying an exorbitant amount for this. How that manifests itself going forward, we're seeing farms in Africa convert to more regenerative farming. We're
Mhm.
seeing farms in Brazil come online, which Brazil has never been known as a chocolate producing region. We're seeing farmers in Latin America expand their production to try to keep up with the world's demand. And you're seeing industrial food companies like General Mills, Kellogg's, Kellanova, those guys
Mhm.
move away from things like cacao powder to substitutes, to carob, for example, to different derived products with a chocolate flavor, but not chocolate powder.
This is where another reason I thought it was really interesting to speak to you is you've been working with farmers, particularly in Ecuador,
Hmm.
uh, and you're helping them do more than simply think about regenerative practices. You have them measuring carbon emissions and so forth. How did you get
Absolutely.
them to that point? That seems like a pretty heavy lift for farmers who, in many cases, are subsistence farmers.
Well, in most cases, to be honest, I
Yeah,
mean the average size of a cacao farmer in Latin America is less than 12 acres. So these guys, I mean, we're sourcing from tens of thousands of
right.
farmers. We work with the co-ops, and the co-ops are on the ground, And
Hmm.
the co-ops are out there saying, hey, look what we can help you do in not only improving your yield of cocoa beans, but hey, let's start harvesting plantains. Let's start harvesting passion fruit. Let's plant some other plants in this ecosystem that's going to not only protect the cocoa beans in the sense of a drought or lack of, whatever rainfall that they need, but it's also going to give you another cash crop. I visited a farmer back in February. I was in Latin America and I'm headed to Ecuador in about 15 days. But I was in Latin America visiting one of our farmers, and he had plantains, cocoa beans, passion fruit vines, vanilla bean vines, and he had a fish pond on his place where he was raising fish. So their income comes from a lot of different sources, and we're trying
Yeah.
to support that.
How has what that farmer does on a daily basis, with regard to the cacao in particular,
Mhm.
changed as a result of your work with them? Do they have technology to understand the emissions associated with their work?
Not really. We leverage the co-ops in doing that. And we use, and a lot of it at this point, obviously, has to be estimated
Mhm.
because we can't go touch 35,000 farmers. We can't check the soil health of 10,000 farmers even. I mean, it's just not economically feasible. So what we do is we identify some of the key growers in the regions. We go and visit their farms. We check the soil health. We work with them to say, hey, if the soil health improves, then your yields are going to be better.
Mhm.
Instead of that cocoa plant having 18 pods, it's going to have 22 pods this year. And the pod contains 38 to 40 beans, regardless of the size of it, but you want that pod to be a little bit bigger because your beans are a little bigger then. And so we work with them on those types of initiatives. And those things we can get them to measure. The carbon emissions are something that we actually, believe it or not, we use satellite imagery and spatial recognition to determine what does that farming area look like. If we see a lot of taller trees in there, we feel like, okay, they're capturing most of the carbon emissions because the trees are absorbing the carbon. If we
Sure.
see areas where there's clear cut, it's like, okay, how do we get to them? How do we work with the co-ops to get to them, to educate them on, hey, if you plant a few growing trees, taller trees, higher coverage, your cocoa beans are going to prosper better and you're going to capture more emissions.
So do you see progress in reversing that deforestation through agroforestry? And are you creating incentives in particular to put those trees in place other than the potential yield benefit?
We're not putting incentives in place in terms of paying them to put the trees in, but we're paying for the trees in a lot of cases,
Through
giving
the
them.
extended price. Okay.
Yeah. And we're also working with them, with our co-ops as well, to determine, okay, what cocoa beans are growing best in this particular region, in this environment. There are about 140 different species of cocoa plants. And
Mhm.
we're actually working with some of our farmers down there to create hybrids that are more disease resistant, more drought resistant, and testing those with the co-ops to see how they grow and what the yields are. And so as we're helping them, because a cocoa plant really is good for about 50 years. That's kind of their life cycle. It takes them about 5 years to produce fruit.
Right.
And then in about 50 years or so, they're getting to a point where they don't yield as much. We obviously have some farmers down there. One of our farmers I met with in February, he's in his 60s and he took over his farm from his father, and his father took over his farm from his grandfather. So that farm's been there for a while. So we try to help them with giving them new plants and new hybrids and things that are going to grow to produce a better yield.
Well, now you also support Planting Justice, which is committed to social equity in these
Mhm.
farming communities. How does that support change, in particular, that third generation cacao farmers' decision making in any way?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that it does. I mean, these guys live day to day, week to week, year to year, to be honest. If cocoa prices are going up, they're going to plant more cocoa trees, cocoa plants, but it takes 5 years to yield. It's not like an annual crop.
Mhm.
I've dealt in environmental and agricultural crops for decades, and you know 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when ginger prices skyrocketed, well, guess what? All the farmers went and planted ginger. But it's an annual crop. They can do that. Cocoa's a
Mhm.
little bit different. It's the long play, and they have to be committed to it for the long play.
So, how does social justice encourage them to make that long-term commitment? Does I was trying to understand what the program's impact is. Is it shaping long-term planting decisions?
It is. It's also shaping an education around what are the market demands. It's a lot of training on economics, supply
Okay.
and demand. The demand of cocoa is not going to go down. I mean,
Mhm.
I don't think as a society we're going to stop eating chocolate. It's been around since the dawn of time.
I'm
And
hoping we can continue.
I am too. I am too. And so it's a lot around education of supply and demand and of markets. And the farmers there really, they listen to the co-ops. The co-ops are the ones that are really, they're the money flow into the farmers individually.
Mhm.
And so we've been working with most of our co-ops. The one that I'm meeting with in Ecuador in December, we've been working with them for almost 20 years. So we have a relationship with them that is based on trust, is based on transparency, is based on let's do what's good for the entire supply chain, not just the farmer, but the co-op themselves, then the
Mhm.
processors, even to the point of the distributors and the retailers. I mean, when you walk into a retailer and you pick up an Alter Eco product, we want you to feel like you can trust the fact that we've taken care of everybody along that supply chain, but we've also delivered you a high quality product.
Now, the other thing that you're doing in order to reach carbon neutrality right now is buying some offsets. Do those
Absolutely.
programs Are those programs targeted in such a way that they're also creating those social impacts as well?
Well, it's interesting because the short answer is yes.
Okay.
Because we work with climate partners to identify projects that we want to invest in based on our carbon offsets. This year, for the first time, we actually can spend those carbon offset dollars on projects that we initiate as opposed to the NGO initiations. So that's one of my main topics on my agenda in Ecuador is what can we do right here with you, our co-op, to help with carbon offsets, and how can we use our dollars to support that directly as opposed to going through the NGOs to support projects that they've been working on. Not that those are bad projects. We will still continue to support those, but we actually, for the first time, are being allowed to actually direct those dollars to specific projects that work within our specific supply chain. That's pretty exciting.
And encouraging. I mean, it sounds like we can slowly but surely turn this ship. Of course, we have to take care of the atmosphere in order to ensure that that change is durable.
Right.
But I'm curious, the biodiversity COP just recently happened in Colombia. Coming
Mhm.
out of that, do you feel like there's international cooperation really going to, for instance, increasing the biodiversity in Latin America where the cacao farmers are?
I absolutely do. I absolutely do. And if you look at the big processors down there, Latin America has been known for cacao processing for years,
Mhm.
decades, centuries even. And those big processors down there are as actively involved in working toward agroforestry, regenerative farming, and biodiversity and climate control as we are as a brand. I see that, and a lot of products that they produce are going into the standard supply chain of cocoa powder, cocoa butter, not finished goods, but they are even taking that back to the raw material ingredients.
That's encouraging to hear. Let me take a quick commercial break. We're going to come back and continue this fascinating discussion. Now let's return to the discussion with Alter Eco Foods CEO Keith Bearden. The company is working to make its snacks the cleanest and greenest available to consumers. And so, Keith, talk about what you're doing to reduce your footprint by 50% by 2030. And where are you in that process so far?
Well, we're making significant progress. There's a number of different initiatives that are underway in that total overarching goal. One is we're working with our manufacturing partner in Switzerland. So all of our chocolates are made in Switzerland, and the Swiss been making premium chocolates for over 400 years, so they kind of know what they're doing. Our manufacturing partner over there is producing our products using, at this point, the last time I measured it was about 80% clean energy sourced from wind and water.
Mhm.
So our goal is to get that to 100%. We have made some significant progress just this year with logistics. You look at our logistics transportation cycle of our products, we source in Latin America, we ship to Switzerland, we ship back to the US, and then we distribute across the US. So most of the product moves on container ships
Mhm.
from Latin America to Switzerland and from Switzerland back to the US. But we were doing a lot of trucking once it hit the US. And as you know, carbon emissions from truck transportation is some of the worst.
Yep.
So we changed our transport model. We used to bring our products from Switzerland to California because the company was founded in California. Some of our legacy partners, including our logistics partner, was located in California. So we were bringing that ship all the way through the Panama Canal to California and bringing it into our warehouses there. 60% of our sales happen on the East Coast, and we were trucking it across the country.
Back and forth, back and forth.
We changed that model this year in January, and we bring our products via ship to Norfolk, Virginia, where we put them on a rail car, which is significantly a reduction of carbon emissions, actually about 30% of what a truck emits. We ship them by rail to Columbus, Ohio, where we moved our warehouse to Columbus, Ohio, and we distribute out of there. We've cut our footprint of carbon emissions by truck within the US by over 60% this year.
I was really surprised to see that you, in your 2023 sustainability report, said that you had only used air freight twice in that year. Do you happen to know why you decided to use air freight in those two circumstances?
Yeah, we launched a brand new product back early in 2023. One of our truffle thins, creme brulee, is the flavor.
Mhm.
And we sorely underestimated the adoption rate of that new product. It immediately went into two of our main retailers,
Mhm.
and it sold out within the first few weeks. And those retailers came to us and said, if you want to keep the slot on the shelf, you got to resupply.
So really, your ability to do that kind of projection of market demand and the centralized distribution strategy you're taking can help you, except in those like, surprising cases of over
Sure.
demand, really reduce your impact. How do you talk to other companies, other CEOs, and other food manufacturers about their potential to do the same kind of thing? Do they understand the benefits that you're seeing?
They do. They do. I actually spoke at a conference just a little over a month ago in Minneapolis called the Food Ag Ideas Week was the conference, and I spoke on regenerative agriculture related to brands and how brands embrace regenerative agriculture and reducing their carbon emissions. And there was a pretty good reception to that conversation. And I was at Conscious Capitalism about 3 or 4 weeks ago in Austin. And so I'm working very hard to get that message out there amongst the food and beverage manufacturers. Production planning is difficult, especially when we produce our products in Switzerland. We have about a 3-month lead time.
Hmm.
And so we've worked very, very hard with our operations team and with our manufacturing partners to try to dial in that forecast. And then I worked with the sales team to try to make sure that we're setting expectations in the market when we do launch a new product. We haven't used air freight at all this year.
You're also encouraging this industry-wide collaboration is to think about how to lower our impact. Is one of the keys to doing so companies sort of tearing down the walls around their current distribution or production system and collaborating in key areas in order to lower the overall impact of the industry? Are we at a point where you have to rethink what competition means in order for everybody to get through what we're going into?
We're definitely at that point. I wouldn't say those walls have come down yet.
Okay.
There are certain companies in the chocolate industry in particular that I think we're all working very closely. It's a friendly competition,
Mhm.
but it's a collaboration on how do we all do things better to make the world survive, essentially. And I'd call out Tony's Chocolonely. I would call out Endangered Species. I know both of those companies very well. I know the people that run those companies. While we all three have a little bit different focus on what our main impact can be, we're all working toward making the world a better place. And I use the phrase some of us that are playing along those rules are improving the planet one chocolate bar at a time.
Well, you really are describing a situation in which, if you're going to manage the food supply appropriately, you need coordination between the companies that are competing for the resources in order to make these products. Is
Mhm.
there a limit to the ability to collaborate implicit in capitalism?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I'll give you an example with Tony's, for example, because a lot of their income is coming from supplying raw materials to other chocolate companies. So there's a collaboration that's happening there, and they're sourcing all of their chocolate from Africa, and their focus is reducing slave and child labor in the supply chain.
Yep.
That's their main focus. And I admire that. We don't have that focus because we're sourcing out of Latin America. You don't have those problems in Latin America the same way you did in Africa. We're also organic. They're not, so we play in a different field. But I think some of the collaboration that's going on is happening because we all believe that we can work together and solve some of these problems. Within Latin America, we're working with some new suppliers and new manufacturers down there that have really come online to try to solve the problem locally, where I'm not moving away from our co-ops because we've worked with them, like I said, for 20 years, but I'm encouraging new partners to come into the fold. And by doing that, we may not even buy materials or products from them, but if they work with the same co-ops and their processors, then they're going to expand that footprint of regenerative agroforestry in Latin America.
Do you see ultimately the ability to reach carbon neutrality without offsets because of the kinds of reductions that you might be engineering into the supply chain?
I don't think so. I think the United States is such a vast demographic, marketplace. We're still always going to have trucks involved.
Hmm.
We're still always going to I travel my team always my sustainability manager, she's like, "Really? You have to fly to Toronto this week? Come on." You know, can't you do it via Zoom? And I do try to do a lot of virtual meetings, but at the end of the day, business is better conducted face to face. And so there's still a lot of that goes on. I think we will get to carbon negative in some of our farms,
Hmm.
but unless we were to move our manufacturing to the source, I don't think we personally can get there, because shipping from Latin America to Switzerland and Switzerland back to the United States, even though we're doing it in the most efficient way and the lowest carbon emissions way possible. I mean, even from Switzerland to the port, Switzerland's not a port country.
Nice landlocked country. Yeah.
A little bit. We put it on a barge in the Rhine River and take it up to Antwerp.
But you're really making the point that the logistic system that we have, if we electrify it in particular, could radically reduce those emissions as well.
For
When you
sure.
all of that and what we talk about as scope three emissions, some of
Well,
the
yeah,
indirect emissions, how are you measuring that entire system now? And
we are.
so you are. How very few companies have been able to do that. How are you doing it?
We work predominantly with our manufacturing partner because they have a goal of being carbon neutral as well.
Okay, so
And
but there's an alignment of values there. Do you
all the way back to the co-ops that we're buying from in Latin America.
The other interesting question, and you're very upfront about your commitment to organic, to regenerative, to sustainable. How do you communicate what you're doing to your customers at retail? Your sustainability report is one way you can do that, but are they looking for this kind of choice? And how do you tell them this is it?
It's that's the $64,000 question. You get 8 to 12 seconds for a
Yeah.
consumer when they're standing in front of the shelf at whatever XYZ retailer to choose your product. I think the consumers that walk into the natural channel, Whole Foods, Sprouts, natural grocers, I think they assume that everybody on that shelf is doing the right thing. I would argue that we're doing the right thing more than most, and we try to communicate that. I just recently brought on a new chief marketing officer. The first week she was with us, she said, "So describe Alter Eco to me in one word." And I'm like, I, 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 I can't do that. I'm like, "We're organic, sustainable." She's like, "No, no, 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 you've lost me. That's not why I buy chocolate." And I said, "Well, we taste really good. We're made in Switzerland." She's like, "Okay, let's lead with that." And then once the consumer buys us and they taste our products, they're going to be like, "Wow, this is a really good product." And she said, "And then we can tell them it tastes better because it's made better. And then we can tell them that the reason they can feel good about their purchase is that not only did they get to enjoy a wonderful tasting chocolate, they did something good for the planet. They can be an eco warrior, but they can't be that. You can't convince them that that's the reason they buy chocolate." And so we've been spending a lot of time and effort on social media, on
Yeah.
influencers, on getting the word out there. I will say retailers are moving that way as well, because
Mhm.
if you read the studies from Nielsen and IRI and Spins, they will tell you that the Gen Z consumers are more concerned about transparency. And I've learned a lot of phraseology that these Gen Z and Gen Alphas use, like show your receipts. And I'm like, what do you mean, show my receipts? Show your receipts of where you're buying those carbon offsets. What are they going for?
Yeah.
What are you doing with the farmers? Show your receipts. We do that. We do that every year. We expose ourselves. We are very transparent in what we do. And I think that's resonating with the younger consumers, especially.
That also represents a different kind of business model, one where the transparency, the ability to see into it, is the authenticity that so many people have been talking about creating, but not actually doing because confidentiality ultimately comes back rolling in and
Mhm.
washes away that willingness to share the information. Do you think that over the long term that we are actually going to see business go that way because of those young consumers, or is this
I think they're
transitory?
going to force it. I think they're going to force it. I think they're going to drive it. And communications obviously has changed tremendously in our lifetimes.
Mhm.
With them, information was always at their fingertips. You
So
know,
what should they do if they want to see that happen faster? What's your advice to a consumer who wants to influence the companies they buy from?
I think they become vocal. I think they
Hmm.
become vocal on social media. I got invited to go to an influencer event back in March during the week of Coachella in California. And these influencers, it was a kind of a gifting lounge, if you will, where these influencers came and they got connected with brands that the people that put this on selected brands specifically that they felt represented what these millennials and Gen Z influencers wanted to see. Earth friendly, climate neutral, no animal testing, organic, transparency, all those things. And we got selected. We got invited to go. Didn't cost us anything. We just had to show up. And there were 750 influencers there. And in order to get invited, you had to have a minimum of 1 million followers. These kids, to me, they're kids, they came in there and they engaged in conversation with us that thoroughly impressed me in both their desire to understand their commitment to what they stood for and believed in, and their willingness to share that with everybody they talk to and everybody that follows them. And we've seen an unbelievable amount of organic social media for Alter Eco because of those types of events. These kids aren't shy about telling you what they think.
Oh, and in fact, they've decided to stake out a direction and take us all there, which
Yeah,
is incredibly encouraging.
it
So
is.
here's the acid test: is how do listeners learn everything they need to know about Alter Eco Foods products so that they can be as confident as that influencer?
Well, they can visit our website. So we're very transparent in everything we do. If you go to alterecofoods.com, you'll see our sustainability regenerate. We call it our regeneration report. It's not just a sustainability report. We publish that every year. And we measure ourselves on what we're sourcing from regenerative agriculture. We measure ourselves on our carbon emissions. We measure ourselves on our waste. And we report that to the population. They can also go and scour the media. You'll see that we get referenced a fair amount. Whole Foods talked about our truffle wrappers in their 2025 trend report, that compostability is the thing of the future, and they referenced our truffle wrapper.
Keith, this has really been an inspiring conversation. And congratulations on all the progress you've made. I'm looking forward to keeping up with you as you continue to grow.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
You've been listening to a conversation with Keith Bearden, CEO of Alter Eco Foods, which is a chocolate and snack maker dedicated to reducing its environmental impact and encouraging the adoption of regenerative farming practices in its supply chain. You can learn more about Alter Eco Foods, its chocolate and granola products at alterecofoods.com. Alter Eco Foods is all one word, no space, no dash, alterecofoods.com. You know, there's a key point in the discussion that I want to reiterate here. I learned about Alter Eco Foods from a Gen Z colleague. And as Keith explained, consumers and influencers are actively campaigning for environmentally responsible foods, clothing, and products in every category. And it's working, albeit never as fast as we might like, but the transition is underway. Retailers are stocking their shelves with more sustainable products, and companies, at least the enlightened ones, the ones who are going to survive too, are recognizing the benefits of transparency, not just with consumers, but among companies in the same supply chain, which will ultimately lead to effective reductions in emissions across the economy. And every one of us is a curator of our personal experience, and those choices can influence others. So I encourage you to think about sharing the product choices you've made based on the environmental and social impact of the products that you buy. Share those ideas with others. Being an example of sustainable, regenerative consumption can change markets. It can certainly change what is on the shelf at your local grocers, but only if you let retailers, brands, and other consumers know what you value. Be a guide to the future. Don't wait for others to lead us there because, well, look, we know what that gets us to. We're in the midst of the climate crisis because of our historical choices. Stay tuned to Sustainability in Your Ear for ongoing coverage of better choices and how to ask the questions that can transform our economy. Another action you can take is spreading the word about this episode or any of the more than 490 interviews. We're almost to 500 shows, folks, that we have in our archives. Writing a review on your favorite podcast platform will help your neighbors find us. Folks, you're the amplifiers that can spread more ideas to create less waste. So please tell your friends, family, your coworkers, the people you meet on the street they can find Sustainability in Your Ear on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, or whatever purveyor of podcast goodness they prefer. Thank you, folks, for your support. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe. This is Sustainability in Your Ear, and we will be back with another innovator interview soon. In the meantime, take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a green day.